Hi there, it's Marzena. Last month we were celebrating my channel's 5th anniversary. Yay! I believe that after all these years, I deserve a little upgrade. Much better. Today's project is another piece for my Graveyard Encounters series. Last time we've met a bloody vampire, but today it's just a lovely angel. Or is she? Let's dive in. I picked Rochelle Goyle as my base doll for this project. I thought that her frowny face would look, well, convincing for an innocent angel. Let's destroy her first. I started the doll preparation by cutting her hair as close to the scalp as possible. I separated the head from the body. Then I got rid of the remaining hair plaques. When the head was properly bald, I removed the factory face with the help of 100% acetone. When it was finally squeaky clean, I shrank it. You can watch my head shrinking tutorial if you're interested in how I did it. It was finally time to reconnect our head with the body. So I widened up the neck hole, trimmed down the neck peg, slimmed down the neck, and heated up the head with a hair dryer. Voila! The neck to head transition always needs some touch-up. I wanted my angel to have a regular human ears, so I snapped the gargoyle's ones off and found a regular ears donor. I glued the ears in place and filled the gaps with epoxy sculpt. I don't like strongly defined eye sculpts cause the eyes I draw are way smaller than original ones. So I decided to even out those areas by sanding down the eyeballs, sounds fun, and evening the surface with a bit of epoxy clay. After it all cured, I gave it a little bit sanding to smooth the transitions out as much as possible. We don't want nasty lines on our pretty face. Here comes the twist. I took 2 pieces of wire and I bent them to my liking, creating the core for the horns. Yup, our little angel is not exactly who she says she is. I glued the wires in the remaining ear holes along with thinner wire that I wrapped around the main one to work as a retention for the clay. I mixed my epoxy and sculpted the horns. First the overall shape, then the segments, and I finished them with some texturing. On the next day the horns were cured, so it was time to turn my girl into a cozy burrito. I sprayed her face with a layer of white primer and 3 layers of Mr. Super Clear UV Cut Flat Varnish. If you can't find the flat version, only the matte one, a nice man from Mr. Hobby told me it's the same product, just a new name, so it should work the same. You could still see some imperfections in the eyes area, but I hoped that layers of face-up will even it out. I didn't really have any actual color scheme in mind. I kinda improvised. The only thing I knew was that I want her to look regular, but also a little bit divine color-wise. So, not extremely colorful skin, but maybe a little bit golden-like or something. Not totally natural. I don't know what exactly went wrong. Was it the weather playing tricks with the varnish? Maybe the layer of the primer was too thick? But I had a pretty hard time drawing the eyes. The pencils didn't want to draw as nicely as usual, and they were even scratching through all the layers. Especially the white pencil was visibly misbehaving. I tried to push through, hoping that maybe more layers of properly cured MSC will fix the problem. But it was bad. I had to take a step back and wipe the face clean once again. This time I sprayed only a thin layer of white primer, and I made sure that varnish layers were curing in a warm room with low humidity. I used this little step back to rethink my color scheme and decided to add less yellow and more pink to her complexion. This doll was a bit of a pain in the butt for my camera focus, due to her being almost white and on the light background. But it got better with more contrasts and details. I want to use this face-up process that is quite self-explanatory to address an issue which more and more of you are pointing out in my comment sections. Some of you feel concerned and some even surprisingly mad at me that I don't praise my work enough. I'm getting lots of comments saying that I should be more proud or that I shouldn't punch myself down whenever I'm stating that something that I've made is not perfect but good enough, or that I'm still learning. I appreciate all those comments, but I want to assure you, me seeing where I could do better in the future doesn't mean that I'm not happy with what I've accomplished in the present. I'm very proud of my work, even if I think something could be done better. This is a journey for me. I started this channel with zero experience in doll customization, and I believe that I've made a tremendous progress. And the most importantly, I still enjoy creating my dolls very, very much. But I'm still nowhere near where I'm aiming. Maybe I will never get there, but the journey is a goal in itself. And trust me, I am full of myself enough, without praising my own work to you guys constantly. I will still look critically at my creations and skills, because I want to see where I can improve next time. You won't see me writing poems about how gorgeous my dolls are, yet I will still be proud of them, because I know that I am always trying my best. If this approach annoys you, I honestly don't know how to help you. I failed at drawing bright lashes on my mouse fairy, but I wanted to try it here anyway. And I was determined to make it work this time. Rochelle has a very special textured vinyl, and because I couldn't hide the tiny holes that those specks in the vinyl create, I decided to turn them into freckles. You know that I love drawing freckles on my dolls, and I believe that this one just takes the cake. I think that the amount of freckles, the blush and blonde eyelashes make her look really innocent and cute. And that is exactly what I was aiming for with this face up. Because our little devil preys on people who think just that. Oh, what an innocent, sweet angel. You come closer and then, wait, why does she have horns? Are those hooves? Too late. Boom! Lights out. No one ever heard you scream. You're gone, like you were never here. And to be fair, what would you even be doing here at night? At the cemetery. I used a brown wash on the horns to make the texture pop out a little more. I also added a little highlighting to them. And with white acrylic paint, I added a tiny catch lights in the eyes. Anyway, the face was done and here's the before and after comparison. Head shrinking for the win. And I was also pretty satisfied with the new face. To the body then. Oh wait. To position the body properly, I had to create the tombstone for our girl to sit on first. For this I used Super Sculpey and I sculpted it flat on a piece of plexiglass. I started with a base shape and then started adding details. I didn't have any plans on how I wanted to look. Last time I looked for inspiration on Google, but this time I just improvised. I decided to sculpt a pair of wings, because the main theme of the project was an angel. There are plenty of angel sculptures on graveyards, so why not a pair of angelic wings on a tombstone? I used 99% alcohol to smooth the clay out. Also, a Requiescat in Pace plaque was absolutely essential. I created a stone texture by pressing a ball of aluminium foil into the clay, and I added some cracks here and there, as the additional details. I baked my finished tombstone, and when it cooled down, I drilled 2 holes in its bottom part for the wire attachments. The clay cracked during drilling, but fortunately only on the part that will be underground, so it won't be visible in the finished piece. I put my tombstone on a temporary stand, and it was finally time to tackle the body mods. I covered the head with a protective wrap and started the mayhem. I cut out the middle part of the doll's torso. Cut off her left leg and curved deep into the crotch area, getting rid of those plastic panties along the way. The separated leg hasn't suffered enough, so I cut off the lower leg and curved into the calf. She also didn't really need her feet. I also detached her arms and modified the shoulders and straightened out her neck just a bit. I sanded down surfaces of all my pieces and drilled holes for the connection wires. At some point I decided to modify the feet and turn them later into hooves instead of throwing them out and making the hooves from scratch. When all the pieces were ready, I connected them with wire, hot glue and super glue. But first I squeezed a piece of aluminium foil into the chest cavity. I checked the pose with the tombstone regularly. Recently, I discovered that wet Q-tips are perfect help when you work with hot glue. I left the arms and feet disconnected for now and moved to the sculpting phase. On the first day of epoxy sculpting, I gave my girl new stomach, thighs, and I also sculpted the left knee and calf. I also took good care of her buttocks. Anno, you're welcome. On the next day, the epoxy was cured completely, so I gave my girl proper sanding treatment. I focused on the transitions and spots that I could fix with more epoxy. I came to the conclusion that despite my previous attempts, her butt was still not bombastic enough, so I fixed that too. I glued the right knee in place and prepared the arms, even though they were still detached. I let the epoxy cure and I smoothed everything out by sanding it once again. It was time to connect the arms to the body. It was once again crucial to check their position on the tombstone as I glued them in place. After that, I drilled a hole for our sneaky little devil's future tail. Time for another round of epoxy. I covered the neck cap and the shoulders. Then our lovely lady could finally get a pair of brand new bazookas. I left the epoxy to cure and totally forgot about the stripe impressions I wanted to sculpt on her shoulders. I fixed that with micromotor and milling cutters, sanding files, and thin strip of sanding paper. I also smoothed out recently sculpted epoxy parts. Next came the hooves. I attached her modified feet and covered them with epoxy sculpt. At first, I only created a general shape of the hooves. Waited few hours for them to harden, and then I sculpted the actual hooves. When those cured, fun! More sanding. And uh-oh, I noticed that her right knee joint cracked. The glue just decided to be a Queen of Arendelle and just let it go. The leg went loose, epoxy cracked, and now I have to fix it. I felt that the right lower leg was a bit too long, so I shortened it. Just a little. It still looks a little long, but I wanted both legs to be the same length, so I didn't want to shorten it too much. Remember how in my last video I said this? Please don't ask me to make any other bird creature in the near future. I've had enough. So, our little angel needs feathered wings. And because I am my worst enemy, I will give them to her. Inhale, exhale. I started with 2 equal pieces of wire that I bent into 2 identical wing shapes. I wrapped those wires with a very thin one as a retention for the glue. Next step, connecting them to the doll's back, but not permanently yet, so I smeared the doll with thin layer of Vaseline. I used epoxy clay. It will increase the surface that will be glued to the doll's back later, and it will also connect my 2 wings together in a final position. When this little blob of epoxy cured, I removed the wings from the doll and wiped both her back and wings part with alcohol. We do not want any Vaseline residue messing with the glue later. I could thin down the connection a little bit with my micromotor. To make the general shape of the wings, I used aluminium foil, which I hot glued to my wire frames. For the base, I used ultralight Sculpey. It is not the easiest to work with and way too crumbly for my taste, but I discovered that a smidge of liquid Vimo makes it way more pleasant to handle. I smeared some liquid Sculpey on the wings and covered them with the clay. Baked it, and when it cooled down, the base was done and it was time for the feathers. Yay! I spread liquid Sculpey on the end of the wings. I cut out the shape of the feather from cosplay because it stays quite flexible after baking, so the risk of breaking your sculpted pieces is lower than with other clays. I sculpted the feathers in the same manner I did on my phoenix. And then, feather after feather, I covered the whole wing with those little suckers. I made one side of the wings, then I baked it, then I repeated the process on the other side, along with the feathers on top of the wings. And voila! Pretty decent wings for our pretty but indecent girl. Next, she needed a tail. To make it, I needed her standing firmly on the tombstone, so I drilled the holes for the wire connection. Then I took a long piece of wire and bent it to my liking. I wrapped it with a thinner wire and covered it with epoxy. Pretty nice, but I decided that the arrow at the tip of the tail is a bit too big. When that part was curing, I took my time to make the boobies shape more natural. As always, just for the shape. She will be wearing a bra. Sorry. Again, I sanded the transitions down when the epoxy cured, and I did the same with the cured tail. Another part that had to be sculpted, the outfit. Just a simple bikini style top and panties. I thought that this kind of garment with gatherings and frill would look cute. I still need to practice sculpting fabrics. They are the trickiest for me, so I try to avoid them as much as I can. Shout out to all my naked fairies. I glued the tail in place and covered the connection with epoxy. Then I sculpted the front of the panties. And the almost finished outfit looked like this. Let's give our girl her wings. I glued them with superglue and finished them by adding tiny epoxy feathers on the connecting part. I didn't want the wings to be coming out of her shoulders. I wanted them to look fake. After all, she only pretends to be an angel. In fact, she's a nasty little devil. This is why her fake wings needed some straps, 'cause they're fake. So I finished the back of the wings and I pressed 3 pieces of wire into the uncured feathers. Those were supposed to be a wrapped wire from a fake halo that she attached to the fake wings. The halo itself was next on my to-do list. I made it from the same wire I pressed into the back of the wings, and the circle part I covered with cold porcelain clay. When the clay cured, I blushed the halo with white and yellow pastels, and to add a little more interest to it, I airbrushed white rays coming from inner edge of the circle outwards. Our girl's bikini was still missing its straps. It can't stay on her only thanks to faith and determination. I took a creamy thread, and because it was a bit too thin, I made a braid from 3 pieces of it. I used UV resin to attach the thread to the garment and to harden it so it became a part of the sculpture. It was quite tricky, but in the end, it looked pretty good. Let's leave our doll for a while and focus on the stand. Firstly, I had to paint the tombstone, so I sprayed it with a black primer. Then I dry brushed it with grey acrylics and highlighted some edges with white. As additional stand details, I 3D printed 3 skulls and painted them with brown wash to enhance all the details. Then a little bit of light creamy dry brushing and the skulls were done. I cut out my stand piece from an oak bar and sanded down the edges on a belt sander to get a circle shape. I also glued an EVA foam sheet at the bottom so the stand won't scratch my shelves. I glued my tombstone in the previously drilled holes. From a duct tape, I created the borders. Everything was now ready for the kitty litter mixture. I mixed wood glue with clean kitty litter and poured it onto the stand. When the mixture started expanding, I pushed the skulls into it. When it expanded even more and stopped being sticky, I poked it here and there to create an uneven surface of the graveyard ground. I left it for a bit longer, and before it cured hard, I removed the tape and fixed the edges. I contemplated on it for a while and came to a conclusion that the stand was way too high and that I couldn't just leave it like that with clear conscience. So I ripped it apart. I shortened the tombstone's underground part and repeated everything along with printing and painting new skulls. The steps back are always painful, but I was very content that I took this one. I am, in my own opinion, not the best at making highly detailed designs, but I always try to add to my projects as many points of interest as possible, without fighting my ache for minimalism. I felt that a white sheet of fabric draped on the tombstone would look pretty cool, and as I mentioned, I need to practice more when it comes to sculpting fabrics. So it was a perfect opportunity. This one I created from a very thin sheet of cold porcelain. When it cured, it had this nice semi-translucent look. I painted the stand with brown and black acrylics. And I made some pastel shading on the fabric. Another detail I wanted to add to the stand was a lily flower. I have no idea why it reminds me of graveyards and death, so don't even ask me. But it does, and I wanted to make it. I started by creating the petals. I rolled 6 balls of cold porcelain and flattened them out. Then I cut them into shape, pressed them between a petal mold, and cut into shape some more. I thinned the edges, repeated all of this on all 6 pieces, and stored them in a zipper bag. I cut 7 pieces of very thin floristic wire and bent 6 of them at the tip. I dipped those tips in Elmer's glue and attached teeny tiny sausages of red tinted clay to them. The 7th got a tiny ball on the tip instead of a sausage. I twisted the stamens together around the pistil and started to glue the petals. Then I took a tiny ball of green tinted clay to make receptacle at the bottom of the flower. In a similar manner that I made the petals, I made the leaves, but I attached them to the floristic wire this time. I also made 2 closed flowers. With all the pieces ready, I prepped the floristic tape and gathered all the flowers and leaves together. I didn't pick the best color of the tape, so I painted the stem with acrylic paint and added some blushing to the flowers. I also added tiny dots on the open flower's petals. And great! The tiny flower was done. Back to the doll. It was finally time for body blushing, so I sprayed her with a layer of white primer and 3 layers of Mr. Super Clear varnish. On the skin, I just did a similar blushing as on the face, with legs and tail ended with red and black ombre effect. I used to really hate body blushing, but I must say I learned to really enjoy it. I can't imagine just leaving a plain one-colored body. And I think those colorful blushings became a sort of on-brand thing for my channel. When I was satisfied with the skin, I painted the garment with creamy acrylic, and after that, I shaded it with brown pastels. I also painted the hoofs and the tip of the tail with black paint. Then, one of my favorite parts, the freckles. Her wings also needed shading. I started with grey and then added black in the deepest crevices and light blue at the tips of the feathers. I also added some highlights with white pencil and acrylic paint, but those turned out not very visible. One wing was done. Time for the second one. And the body blushing was finished. I could remove the protective wrap and do little fixes to the neck. As for her manicure, I picked bloody red with black French tips. Nice. And so you guys have no doubts that she is a nasty B-word and not as cute as she looks. I added a bit of blood on her hands and I spattered some more behind the tombstone. I think it looks great on the draped sheets. As for the hair, I wanted them to be extremely long, so I got my hands on this beautiful mohair hair. It's very soft and lovely, but way more slippery and a bit harder to handle than the hair made from acrylic yarn. The hair came sewn to the tape, so I had to turn them into regular glued wefts, because the tape was way thicker than how I wanted the wefts to be. Handling the doll was tricky during the hairstyling, so I did it off camera. Screw the blood. She's cute. I glued the halo to her back and she was done. Pretty lovely looking devil's spawn. I glued her to the stand, but it still needed some last touch-ups. I spread a layer of matte Mod Podge and sprinkled some battlefield steppe grass and tiny rocks. I also added few little less tiny rocks here and there. To fix everything in its place, I watered down a bit of Mod Podge and applied it evenly on the stand using syringe. And I left it overnight to dry. It still wasn't grassy enough, so grass tufts it is then. I glued a bunch of those and there was only one thing to add. My tiny lily flower. And with that little detail done, my devil in disguise was finished. It was a little bit weird concept, but it was also fun to explore and create. And I am very pleased with the end result. She really looks cute, and I totally understand that her look might not ring any alarm bells in her victims' heads. I especially like how freckled she is. There's only one thing I don't like about her, and it's her right lower leg. It still looks a bit long or broken, but she's a devilish demon, so who am I to judge? Now, what do you think about our quote-unquote angel? Is she angelic enough to catch you off guard? If you like her, let me know in the comment section. I love reading all your comments, and algorithm loves them too. Also, don't forget to give her a thumbs up, and if you want more, subscribe. I would also love to hear what you think about my new avatar. I still suck at drawing, but I did spend a lot of time working on that one. So I hope it's good enough upgrade compared to the old one. For more updates on my doll shenanigans, you can join me on Instagram and X. And if you want to support me even more, you can buy me a virtual coffee at ko-fi.com. All your support is highly appreciated. That will be it for today. Thank you guys for watching and see you soon! Kwiatuszku. Śpisz sobie na kwiatuszku? Mm.